This is Judge Joe Brown, and you're watching We All Be News TV, the
News Free Dixie.
News Free Dixie for the 21st century.
We all be is honored to have once again the one and only, the truly honorable Judge Joe Brown with the word of today. Like every day, a man who is very profound and make it plain, as usual. In the words of the great Malcolm X, he makes it plain. How you doing tonight, Judge?
All right, young man, I'm doing fine.
Yeah, we've been talking some good stuff, man. You got a lot to say, especially like what's going on right now in the world of entertainment as well as in the real world of politics and all this stuff. But it's like it's very overwhelming. But where would you like to start tonight?
Okay, let's start with something that's local to Memphis, Shelby County.
Okay.
There is a gentleman that for years has been telling the truth about the realities of this place politically. His name is A.L.L, but the powers that be don't like him because he just keeps focusing on the raw truth and the right and the wrong of things, and they don't like that because there are too many corners cut. And he sent a submission to the county commission suggesting that they release the information first thing in 2018 relative to the taxpayers' money that has been paid out to settle the hashtag Me Too issues in Shelby County. In other words, how many elected officials have managed to cause the taxpayers to pay out money? How many times have there been these problems in these agencies we have, like the clerk's offices, the DA's office, juvenile court, their clerk's office, and some of the county agencies? How many times have the taxpayers had to pay for settlements or non-disclosable out-of-court resolutions to matters? How many times have there have been occasions when EEOC has found cause? And I think that's going to ruffle a few feathers. I really do, which leads us, of course, to this whole hashtag Me Too thing that's been going on recently. My reaction to that is it's awful to exploit a woman if you are a man. But we have another problem that's going on that's more serious. It's the erosion of respect for some of the principles in our Bill of Rights, one of which is innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And right now, because the press is trying to be politically correct and a lot of the people that are pushing the issues are indigenous to the press itself, we are trying people in the media, and accusations are leading to people being fired even if they deny things, or leading to calls for resignation, and people are resigning. I think that is a bad policy, and it sets something of an institutional precedent that is not good. We have people like that sleaze Nancy Grace, who goes around as a lawyer, a former prosecutor, and starts harping about the Fifth Amendment needs to be abolished because the people have a right to know, to satisfy their inquiring minds, that's more important than some defendant's right to remain silent. So that's getting on very dangerous ground, and that troubles me. there was a thing that hit Twitter, and there was a big to-do about that. It was a woman who was a contributor to Teen Vogue, and she was tweeting for several days about it's okay to destroy an innocent man in his career with false accusations if it helps out the feminist cause. You see, and that's nothing but salacious garbage, and that's a scumbag who would advocate that kind of thing. But you see, that person is still writing for impressionable teen girls. You've got a movement afoot that goes along with this that's spreading back east, where they want to create a new category of rape called rape by seduction, in addition to forcible rape. In other words, if the woman is caused to be impassioned and eroticized, and because she is, let's say, getting turned on and she decides to have sex, that should be called rape by seduction. I want it so when the woman is totally calm and everything, the guy's supposed to ask and get permission to engage in foreplay and get her worked up, and then before they actually have sex, he's supposed to formally inquire, is it all right to have sex? And they say that if the person is not to be prosecuted, he must ask the woman pointedly during the sex act if it's okay to continue, and then if it's okay to finish. And then for universities and colleges, they want to implement policy where if the girl has second thoughts or doubts or remorse for doing it, the boy can be expelled so the girl doesn't have to go through the pain of seeing him for the next 2, 3, or 4 years that she's attending that college. They want magazines, books, all media to be labeled, warning, this may cause eroticism or arousal in young females. That's getting a little bit crazy because that gets too far away from Boys and Girls 101 / the human animal. Now, one star got in some big trouble because he said there's a scale. There's forcible rape, and that should not be tolerated. Things like that need to be prosecuted. Somebody should go to the jail or penitentiary, and there are things that just amount to extreme flirtation, and those should be treated accordingly. There should be a sliding scale in there depending upon the severity of the offense. He drew a whole lot of negative flack where women were commenting that it's all the same and it all should be treated alike. Well, that kind of goes along with this new development with the young people who are in college and in their early 20s and some in their 30s who feel that anything that makes another person feel uncomfortable should be forbidden. In other words, if more people don't like this speaker or what he may say, that speaker should not be permitted to speak to a student gathering at that university because somebody may be offended. It's part of what you see in the media where somebody says something that may be quite true, but it offends somebody else. Well, then 3 days later, he's issuing profuse apologies, even though what he or she may have said is quite valid. So one thing I do like about Trump, he tells the press to go straight to hell if they don't like it, and he bypasses them. See, he thumbs his nose at them, and he tweets. He doesn't have to go through CNN and ABC, NBC, CBS, USA Today, and the major newspapers. He tweets, so he's got a voice directly to America. And some of what he says makes a lot of sense. A lot of it may aggravate you because it's on a different roadway, a different pathway than you might like. And just as an aside, I don't think he really follows a lot of what he says and does. I think he uses it to cement his base, which is flyover country America. The white population that feels neglected and set upon and has what it calls traditional values that say we like Trump and we can't stand the Democratic Party, especially when they spend so much time on issues like who gets to pee in the girls' bathroom or gun control, which we do not buy. Gun control, I would say, is a specious issue. It's got other things in mind. There are other things behind it which have nothing to do with public safety, except as the ignorant may see it. And the real problem with guns comes from the ones that are smuggled in with the drugs, the opiates, and the cocaine that the war on drugs can't manage to stop. Well, if they can't manage to stop that, they can't manage to smuggle the guns that come back from Israel, South Korea, South America, and the Middle East, where forces and factors over there have a surplus of seized weapons or obsolete U.S. military weapons that they can sell on the black market and generate monies to fight so-called terrorism or provide for intelligence operations. So it seems the U.S. government is simply turning a blind eye to that and saying, okay, you can sell the drugs, sell this stuff in America, make this money to finance your black operations. So I look at cocaine, for example, and that makes absolutely no sense. The analogy is like a 55-gallon barrel of 93 octane premium gas costing less than a 55-gallon barrel of crude oil. In other words, what DEA seizes on importation or smuggling is not crack, it's powdered cocaine. And the powdered cocaine is more expensive than the crack. So how does that manage economically if what they're selling on the streets costs less than the raw material that made it? You see. So there's something going wrong there, but it's popular to try and push this. It distracts the public. And right now we have a thing in place where we've got this new tax plan.
Mm-hmm.
Well, historically, tax plans have absolutely nothing to do with generating enhanced economy where it grows. All it does is take the same sum that's out there when you have a new tax plan, and it rearranges who benefits from it. Warren Buffett wrote an article about the recent tax plan, and he said, my kind have screwed ordinary Americans very badly, and this tax plan screws them even worse. So what happens is the middle class and the lower classes wind up paying proportionately more taxes than the upper class. They get to keep more of what's out there than the middle class does, and in order to operate the country, you have to cut back on programs that benefit the overwhelming majority of the citizens so that the very few can get a tax cut. And then you have to borrow money from the People's Republic of China to make the ends meet. See, that's the thing that they don't talk about. There's all kinds of squabbling about the People's Republic of China, and everybody is doing what used to be called rattling sabers. But the bottom line is the People's Republic of China stabilizes America's currency and also stabilizes most of, actually all of the world stock exchanges. So when the good capitalists get a little bit too randy and wild, they can say, no, you just check and see who owns this, and this, and It ain't going to happen. You've got it out of control. You need to tone it back and be reasonable. So it's a bad thing all the way around. And again, we get back to that old thing that Caesar said, feed them and entertain them, and they won't care what you're talking about or what you do. And they is ordinary people. Keep them fed and entertained. He said, give them bread and circuses. In Latin, it's done pane e circenses. In other words, give them bread and circuses, and they won't care what you do. And that's a classic illustration. And the media is all out these days to try and do something about destabilizing the masculine component of society. There is a large body of people involved with Hollywood, the lesbian interest, the radical feminists, and the LGBTQ crowd who want to, let's say, tone down or take down masculinity. And over the last 45 to 50 years, there's been an asserted and astute campaign conducted by Hollywood to do just that. And it's not surprising, considering that LGBTQ boast that 85 to 90% of all of the people employed in various fields in Hollywood are LGBTQ. So it's not surprising. You can see that. Justice League is a very nice, exciting, superhero movie. There's just one problem with it. You have Batman, Superman, Aquaman, The Flash, and Cyborg. And guess who their leader is? Wonder Woman. You have the new Star Wars is just absolutely atrocious about this. They have actually got this thing down where those on the dark side are masculine and those on the side of light are all dominated by, run by, commanded by, or corrected by strong women. You've got a situation where you put Luke Skywalker up against an untrained young girl, and she's stronger in the Force than he is, and she can wield a lightsaber just instinctively with no training better than anybody else, including Darth Vader's grandson, who is the apprentice to the chief Sith Lord, and she challenges him, and she's got no training. But you have a situation. You've got somebody that's supposed to be a masculine hero. He and a woman are escaping on an animal and riding away at a gallop, and she's sitting in front, and he's holding on to her, telling her not to go so fast. And, there is a good guy who's strong, but he tries to do the man thing, and he's proven wrong, and the women were right. It's just awful the way you go through this thing. And I looked at that and said, man, look what they're doing here. I mean, this is just an ultimate extension of this campaign, Take Your Daughter to Work Week. We have never had a Take Your Son to Work Week. And at one point, somebody said, well, all these boys are all ahead. They need to catch up, the girls. The girls need to catch up. But you look at today's society, and even the Defense Department is upset. For the first decade of the 21st century, their figures showed that, on average, only 28% of each year's high school graduates were male. Only 1/3, basically 32% of the college undergrads were male. And only 36% of the grad students were male. And only 44% of the workforce is male. And something's going wrong, it's as per their conclusion, with the way boys are being raised to be adult males. They're not getting the manhood component. They say we can make you strong, but we can't make you tough. And they're lamenting the fact that the recruits they get are not as tough as they used to be. So now they have to accept women in command roles, and that's what they have done with the military, and now a federal court has ruled they have to let transvestites in. Now, this is where Trump needs to come in. He needs to issue an executive order as commander-in-chief saying, okay, if we got to get them in, we're not going to spend any tax dollars letting them get a conversion operation. That may be why you get so many, or not so many, but apparently some want to get in, because at taxpayers' expense, they get converted. You know, they get the surgery free of charge.
Like Chelsea Manning.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, I look at all of the people who need medical assistance. I look at all of the elderly people who have, well, myself included, who have huge copay bills for necessary medication. And I say, no, you don't need to convert anybody on our tax tab.
Mm.
You know, that's elective. You do that on your own. You got a right to do what you want, but we don't need to pay for it. They have an absolute right to do what they do. They have an absolute right to use the political process to advance their ends. They have an absolute right under the First Amendment to utilize freedom of the press to push their positions. And they have an absolute right to work as anybody else does. But it seems they have gotten control of the media, and they have engaged in a humongous propaganda effort over the last 50 years. And as Joseph Goebbels, propaganda minister for the Nazis, said before World War II, tell a lie one time, it's a lie. Tell it 1,000 times, it becomes the truth. Tell a lie long enough and loud enough, and you can get anyone to believe it. And the news media has spread a lot of mythology that is not in our best interest. Trump puts it out. I think his coined phrase, fake news, is very accurate. And nobody's had the cojones to call the media out on it basically before.
Mm-hmm.
That's fake. I mentioned it, for example, I interviewed Trayvon Martin's mother twice on the radio, and I met her in person. And she advised me that Anderson Cooper of CNN said, please don't reveal to the public that Trayvon's grandfather is a lieutenant detective on the Miami Police Department. That will lessen the impact of the story. He was trying to get ratings. He didn't care about it. He threw out all of that fake news and false information about why Trayvon got killed is because Zimmerman was exercising this horrible stand your ground thing,
mm-hmm.
which actually is the law in all but a handful of states, and it has been since they became states. It is the law in Tennessee, and it's appropriate. And by the way, the person that had the right to stand his ground was not Zimmerman, it was Trayvon Martin. Anderson Cooper put this fake thing out in front of the public about castle doctrine. There was nothing under the circumstances of that case that had a thing to do with castle doctrine. That's what happens when you're in your home. A man's home is his castle. And it came out of a civil case that Florida had where somebody was burglarizing a man's home. He got hurt in the process, and he sues the homeowner. Well, he didn't win, but they wanted it understood that, we don't play that. You are the crook. You're in somebody else's house on forcible entry or by fraud. You have no rights. The guy that controls the castle is the one that does.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a lot of stuff out there that's bad, but I'm particularly concerned about taking down masculinity, because when you do that, unlike what the radical feminists contend, it does not cause men or males to be more peaceful. It simply deprives them of opportunities to be in touch with that hunter, that warrior that's inside of them, that does not go away, because that's part of their nature as an evolved creature that is now the apex predator on the planet that kills the largest creatures on this planet and kills itself real well. That's not going away. That's in the gene code. And when you try to deprive a boy of being in touch with that and getting appropriately acculturated and socialized to that, then you get out of control males who shoot up schoolyards. Men who are in touch with this become peaceful men, but they have what is necessary in them to rise to the occasion when courage and bravery are needed. I've been tweeting that on Judge Joe Brown TV. So that's, by the way, me. Some people want to know, is this really Judge Joe Brown? Yes, it is, on Judge Joe Brown TV. I had to use that because a lot of others, for some reason or another, have over the years decided to represent themselves as me.
Right.
But I'm Judge Joe Brown TV. That's my handle. So I just started tweeting in the middle of the year. I may have 800-900 followers. I don't know. But I get retweeted a lot. So I don't have a blue check, and I don't feel like starting up a website for no purpose just to get a blue check. But there you go. Now, you were asking me some questions before, and I've been going at length.
No, this is good.
Something at me.
Well, it's like a stream of consciousness. Like, you got so much to offer. You're just like a walking encyclopedia. Just a brilliant legal mind, a real true legal scholar, and also just have wisdom just from living life.
I think probably what that's about is I'm slightly autistic, and I tend to get focused on stuff, been worried about this my whole life. But, I try to adapt. So
what? Oh, I like the masculinity thing. I think it's fascinating that the people who are being targeted for this Me Too movement or the taking down, like the man behaving badly, are mostly like heterosexual males. Like even with the owner of the Carolina Panthers, Jerry Richardson, like he's stepping down. They forced to sell the team.
That's part of that anti-masculine thing. See, what they don't talk about is the homosexual side. When I was working on my show, which I did for 15 years, let's say the executive suite of the first CEO that ran my show, or the entity that had my show, I remember there was this 24-year-old girl, 23 initially, who had a year and a half of junior college. And she had a lesbian sexual affair with the wife of another executive. And I saw her last as a file clerk. And 2 weeks later, she's coming over to admonish me about she doesn't like the way I ruled on a case. And I said, you're just a file clerk, now I'm an executive. But see, her sexual concourse with another woman on the homosexual side got her a gig.
Mm-hmm.
And that had a lot to do with the way things operated. I was a straight man, and one of the nastiest, most vile, insulting letters I've ever gotten in my life was November 1998. The show was just a few months old, and some lesbians, 23 of them, wrote a letter to Human Resources complaining about having to work for a straight, heterosexual black male when there were so many nice homosexual black men to work for. See, they resented being assigned to the show. They said my voice was too deep. I was too masculine. I opened doors for them, and they objected to that kind of thing. We went nowhere, but I wasn't at war with them, but they were at war with me because I was a straight black male. And they had a scale of masculine attributes, and at the very bottom of that scale was the African-American/black man, because they think we abuse our women more than any other class of male, and we don't pay our child support, and we make poor fathers. Actually, even this last, whatever he was, I suppose he was African-American since his daddy was African, his mother was a white American, and his stepdaddy who raised him, adopted daddy, was Asian, Indonesian.
Mm-hmm.
But he even came out and said black men are the worst in the country about paying child support. And that is a lie. That is a fake. That is ridiculous. And that's inflammatory, because every judicial conference I went to and every statistic I saw for a 20-year period showed, guess what? The ethnic category that paid their child support most regularly in all of America was African American, or is African American / black men.
Mm-hmm.
When they go through a divorce. Yes, it looks bad when you look at the ones that go to the penitentiary, but the whites are worse. But we are at the very top. We pay our child support better than any other category of man in America. Now, that just gives you an idea about how fake the news is and what people actually think. And we've got scurrilous institutions like our local Memphis and Shelby County Juvenile Court, which ought to be torn down brick by brick and rebuilt, because it is a corrupt, racist institution that has been designed with the specifically stated objective of creating a coalition of poor black women on welfare and well-to-do white Republicans to run the county and destroy the growing influence of black men and women. And they do that because they destroy families and they disrupt things, and they never do what is necessary to put families together and make them most effective. The choices they make are invariably those that make the situation worse. If the woman needs money and the guy's got it, she doesn't get it. If the guy's got it and the woman doesn't need it, she'll get it to ruin him. And if she gets anything and it's paid into them, they keep the child support payments for 14 to 18 months to earn interest and put the interest in a non-interest bearing sequestered account that they use as a slush fund to basically finance the political activities of the Tea Party in Tennessee, Arkansas, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and Kentucky, and Oklahoma. So it's a bad thing all the way around, and it's a game. So ultimate objective by this crowd, just destroy the black man, destroy masculinity in general, and set up a situation that is a matriarchy. And when you have this matriarchy, hopefully science will find a way to effectively clone humans so you don't need the man in the loop anymore. I've heard some of them on the West Coast actually get passionate about marriage is a form of slavery, that having a boyfriend is a form of slavery, that men should not be involved in the rearing of children because having a man involved does nothing but make the child worse when he grows up, which is a complete crock. That is very, very bad. So we have this kind of nonsense, and we have some deplorable figures. 7 years ago, 42% of all Americans, irrespective of race or ethnicity, 35 and under, were born out of wedlock. Now, 7 years later, that percentage is almost 50% of the people in America, 35 and under, all races and ethnicities, were born out of wedlock. And a statistic I saw recently is that 82% of black people, 20 and under, 82% are born out of wedlock. So that means only 18% were born in a traditional family. And when you have a matriarchy, you've got a disaster, because at bottom, the thing that the feminists and the LGBT disregard is that when you've got males out of control, they brutalize women, they do drive-bys, they commit indiscriminate crime, they do not respect women and children and the elderly like some famous criminals do. For instance, those of a certain persuasion who belong to certain mythical organizations
Right.
that supposedly have some Italian or Sicilian connection. They get community support because they protect the women and children and the elderly in the neighborhood, whereas what you see when you've got a matriarchy, you don't get it. They don't know what a man's good for because they don't have a father, they don't have a grandfather, they don't have an uncle that is effective, so they don't know what a man's supposed to be good for, so they don't know how to raise their boys, and when they don't, the boys are out of control and cause chaos where they live. So it's a disaster all the way around, and that's what some people are trying to set up. We've got a social experiment that's been in place for 45 years, which is not long enough to determine whether or not it's effective. And when that is the case, you risk a disaster when it turns out that your experimental methodology based on Dr. Spock and some misguided ideas about raising children turn out to be a crock, and you have ineffective adults who now have full control of the situation. Now, I saw a study in the last few days that said spanking children causes them to behave worse in the future. Well, I went and looked the study up and I read it, and it's poor science because there's another conclusion, which is this: the children that act out sufficiently to provoke a spanking in this day and time have exceptionally bad behaviors. They have behavioral problems, and the spanking doesn't straighten them out, and they continue to misbehave in the future. The problem is not the spanking causing the future misbehavior. It's that the spanking was merited because of current bad behavior that is so bad, and the parenting method applied to that kid is so ineffective that the kid keeps being bad. And they wanted to disregard the obvious conclusion. Now, parenting skills have gone to hell. You go to a restaurant, whether it's white, black, mixed, whatever, upscale, downscale, and the kids have no manners. Obviously no home training, and when they get out someplace where it counts, it's embarrassing, it's so bad. I was sitting in a restaurant, and I was at a table by myself, and this kid walks up to the table. It was an Olive Garden. You know, they have breadsticks and the unlimited salad, you know, so I had some breadsticks. This kid wants to reach up on my table and grab a breadstick, and I slapped his hand away. I said, no, I want some. I said, go ask your mom. I said, lady, would you come get him? This home training is not good.
Right.
And, you know, I tried to embarrass her. But bottom line is you can't expect this child to instantly behave if you haven't trained him. And see, that failure to be able to act like you've been socialized and acculturated as is appropriate for your age never changes, and when they grow up they're not appropriately acculturated and socialized, and they wind up filling the penitentiaries and making neighborhoods chaotic, or they wind up in a situation where 44% of the workforce is male and 56% of, 56% of the workforce is female. And it's bad. That's another thing that's interesting, too. I think if you do the same job, if you're a woman, if you do the same job as a man, you should get paid the same.
Mm-hmm.
But The truth of the matter is when you actually look at the wealth, the women get the wealth of their rich husbands when the husband dies, and the women live longer, or when they divorce him, they get a lion's share of the wealth. So in actuality, women control the majority of the wealth in America. So you may not have the women at the top of the industrial flanks, women. You may not have the people at the top of the heap in the business world women, but the people that own the stock and the shares and the interest in these businesses tend to be women. And 56% of the workforce is female.
Mm-hmm.
So something's happened here. The military says they're not tough. They're not going to school. They're not doing the things men have classically done. And the country's going downhill. And we are exactly in the position that Great Britain was 100-some years ago. Well, let's say right before and then right after World War I, when they had the same exact kind of social mix going on, where education is de-emphasized, and they lost the world's largest empire because of incompetence, class structure, privilege, entitlement, feeling in their general social setup that education was only something that the underclasses did, or certain mechanicals, and the upper class needs to know how to have fun, but does not need to know how to do these technical things. Somebody else can do it for you. It's amazing, but they paid the cost, and we're paying it too. Bernie Sanders said college education should be free at public schools. When I went to UCLA, it was free. We didn't have a tuition. That was after Ronald Reagan got elected governor. Pray tell he was campaigning on the plank that he was going to destroy free higher education, because all it did was produce long-haired hippies and militant Negroes who were anti-American and gave sympathy and comfort to our commie enemies. See, so it's a bad deal, and we now see no mental health. The health care system's gone to hell. The rich have gotten very rich. Everybody else has gotten broke, and our buying power is less than it ought to be. And we call Reagan Saint Ron, the Reagan. You know, everybody loves him. I remember there was a plebiscite at UCLA a few years ago to name the medical center the Ronald Reagan Medical Center. And I just went off on a student-faculty meeting at one time. I said, what in the devil's wrong with you? You do realize he closed this place down 5 times, saying it was socialized medicine and would lead to creeping socialism, and the Supreme Court had to reinstate the medical center, and now you want to honor this clown who was trying to kill it by naming it after him, and you didn't even know any better. See, there's that lie told long enough and loud enough.
It's like the airport, right? It's like the airport in D.C. Like he fired out the air traffic controllers and they got an airport for him.
Fired all of them. He was supporting Wes Wallachia, who was the Polish guy or something like that, who led a strike of the government employees, and he supported him as a hero, yet he fired the air traffic controllers who were striking to get improved air traffic safety, and he fired all of them saying they didn't have a right. Rank hypocrisy, and now we still suffer from it. A lot of what's wrong with the country was set up during the reign of that SOB. He was a brain-dead sucker who was a figurehead, and somebody else was probably running the government, and he was reading or acting out a written script.
Poppy Bush was running the government as vice president.
Well, I don't know. I don't think it was even Bush. I talked to somebody that was very high in administration. We were drinking a lot of whiskey together and asked him. And he says even though he was highly placed in the White House and the 8 years he was there, he never met the president. He said he met the individual identified as Ronald Reagan, but Ronald Reagan was so, let's say, reduced in mental capacity that all he would do is sit around and drool and mooch jelly beans.
Damn.
So they would give him scripts literally, and he still had the ability as an actor to memorize the scripts quickly. He could retain it for an hour or so, so they would just set him up in a fake old 1950s television studio and give him a script and let him go for it. And when he was talking to somebody, they'd give him one of these earbud IFBs so he could hear what they were telling him to say. Now, they did a lot wrong in that administration that we still pay for. We went in debt to the People's Republic of China, and we still haven't paid any of the long overdue interest. We got the tax structure set around so the very, very rich got very, very much richer, and the rest of us had a chunk driven in, so there's a huge gap between those who have and the rest of us, whereas there used to be a graded progression up to that point. 1970, the CEO of General Motors made approximately 4.5 times what the senior lineman made. Now it's like several thousand times more.
Wow.
You see. I remember in 1973, 74, 75, I remember in 76, when they made me the public defender for the city of Memphis, I got paid a whopping $12,000 a year salary. The judges got $18,000 a year salary.
Mm-hmm.
I had gotten the Datsun 240Z, and the Datsun 240Z with everything on it cost me $2,600.
Mm.
Now, that same thing would probably be one of the Nissan sports cars, and what is it now? $65,000, $80,000, $85,000, 8 and 9 times more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And well, that's more than 2,400, 2,600, and 85,000 is a heck of a lot more than 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's way more. That's 80 times more expensive, but the public defender who runs the office isn't making 80 times more than $12,000.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you owe to the Reagan administration. But now everybody loves him and they hate Trump. Trump's nowhere near as bad as Ronald Reagan, even what Reagan's administration used to say, talking about racist nonsense. Reagan made all of these speeches about black welfare, African or black welfare queens cheating the public out of all of their money, which was why times were hard, because of these black women driving Cadillacs with 3 ankle-length fur coats on welfare, and they were cheats. That's why everybody was having a hard time, not because his administration was helping the public be ripped off by an inequitous economic situation, which George Herbert Walker Bush had the decency to name as it was voodoo economics, his trickle-down economy, where if you make it, people will buy it rather than making what the people want to buy. And no matter how broke they are, they'll want to buy what you make. So give all the money to the people that make it rather than making sure that the people who would buy it have the money. And see, that's even against what Henry Ford used to do. He said, I believe in paying the ordinary worker a very good salary because that will enable him to buy what he makes. And we seem to have forgotten that.
Well, you look at the Walmart situation where you got workers that work 40 hours a week. They came in for the food. They got to get an EBT card, and you working 40 hours a week. They're one of the largest corporations in the world.
Uh-huh.
And like the minimum wage should be a living, like, Dr. King talked about the living wage. Like, you look at Noam Chomsky, he said that the minimum wage should be almost $30 an hour.
You know what? It always propagandizing people. Show you how effective it is. A guy who would greatly benefit by raising the wage scale because he's a blue collar worker. He thinks in his inner soul that raising the minimum wage and the expected standard for everybody would be socialism.
Right.
He doesn't know what socialism is, but he thinks is wrong. And you get this thing where Machiavelli said in his treatise, The Prince, 500 years ago, he said, you can oppress people more than you ordinarily could if you give them a chance to become part of the class that does the oppressing. If you do, however slight that chance is, they will put up with and encourage their own oppression. So you Republican rank and file acting like they're going to win the big lottery in 2 weeks. So they support policies that are actually harmful to them with the mistaken idea that somehow or another supporting a policy that actually helps them is somehow wrong.
Yeah.
Tell a lie long enough and loud enough, and the media is too ignorant and inept these days to actually do valid reporting on anything. And they spout a lot of nonsense in a negligent and reckless fashion that misleads the public. So it's a bad situation we have, and the root cause of it is feminism. This stuff did not start in this country. We had race problems. We had some gender relations problems, but we did not have the general social, cultural, and national malaise that we have now until feminism got sway. And they didn't just get rights and equality. They were doing what they were doing to intentionally, deliberately, and willfully suppress masculinity, and that's taken the yin-yang balance to a point where it is out of balance. See, like, look at the hashtag Me Too thing. You get the feminists talking about the women are equal in all respects to men. Well, if that's the case, how in the world can a man exploit a woman? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like men don't exploit men face to face. Why? It's like, man, you're going to get punched out. I may lose, but it ain't going down that way. Now, there's some punk athlete that was talking about his agent and somebody else were trying to sexually proposition him and put him in a bad place, and he didn't know what to do. Well, he's an athlete. He could have busted somebody right in his jaw. Man, sometimes got to do what a man's got to do.
Right.
And if wise enough, he knows when he's got to do it. Now, I say that as a retired criminal court judge. Sometimes men have to do what they have to do, and in sentencing, I always took that into consideration. Sometimes a man's got to do what a man's got to do, and a wise man knows when he's got to do it. And what for.
Well, Judge, while I think about that, even with the athletes, I keep on thinking about the fact, like you said about Cosby, they are attacking heterosexual males, but black males in particular, we're not allowed to be heterosexual men. Like, this is like punishment for the 60s, though. Like, look at all the alpha males we had back in the 60s, and look what happened to them.
But look, it's a feminist conspiracy. It even has the same related two leaders. Attorney Allred and Attorney Bloom, and Bloom is Allred's daughter.
Yeah, it's sickening. Every time I see them near something like this, I know it's a fix.
The two of them are behind all of the complainants against Cosby. They're behind all of the women that are complaining about Trump. they are involved with all of the women that had taken down everybody else. And I remember Allred at an Emmy party. I was there because I'd been nominated the third time for an Emmy. I didn't get it, but I was nominated. Hell, they gave it to a show that had been canceled after 6 weeks, but, you know,
Right.
it is what it is.
Right.
But she was drinking wine, and she said she sometimes knows that the statute of limitations is long run, but she extorts money out of people by saying that we will file or we will bring this out unless we quietly settle this for X amount of money. And then they had some ridiculous arrangement where they'd get a percentage of whatever the woman got for having her story covered, or if they made a movie off of it. And then we find out even against Trump, several of Bloom's clients were being solicited to say something about Trump. One even was promised the $750,000 if she came out, and she backed off of it. But see, you get money for women to come forward and complain, and then you get one of the contributors to Teen Vogue saying she has no problem with false accusations against men that ruin an innocent man's career and life so long as it helps out the feminist cause. See, that's one of our bad evils today, and a lot of what's wrong with society today can be attributed to the radical and, you know, aggressive feminist. I'm not talking about feminism. That's different. I'm all for that. That's like masculinity. But see, this feminism stuff is like males who hate girls and want to be girls. See, that's like girls who hate boys but want to be boys.
Right.
Something is wrong with that equation. You know, they demonize the opposite sex. Now, I like women, and my lifetime slogan has been protecting womanhood and promoting manhood so that can be accomplished. See, I teach boys on their way to be men. It's part of the man training I try to give them. It's your job to be expendable. You should be proud to have the opportunity to die heroically for the right cause. Develop the wisdom to know what that is so it's not for foolishness. But we are expendable. But we look forward to, or should look forward to, the opportunity to be a hero. And if the time comes, even if we lose our lives or suffer and get maimed, it's our duty to rise to the occasion, to overcome fear, to be brave and act with courage, with rightness, whether it is physical or moral.
Well, Judge, what do you think about the man's movement, the man's rights movement, that they're trying to, you know, make their say, hey, a man got right too. You know, they're going out there, they held their rallies and their events, and the feminists, the extreme feminists come out there to try to disrupt everything. But there's a woman that did a documentary about it called Red Pill. Have you seen that documentary? This former feminist.
Bottom line is, it's free speech. Why not? Men need to advocate it. And I frankly am predicting a backlash against this radical feminism. People are going to get the idea of how much it has screwed up society. Most of what's wrong with America right now is not race-oriented. It's problems with the masculine-feminine balance in this country. We've lost the work ethic. We've lost the drive. We've lost the purpose. We've lost the dedication to cause. We have been overtaken by a sense of entitlement, a sense of the right to be pampered, a sense of the appropriateness of over-emotional displays and yielding to and being controlled by emotions. That's not right. I put that, and somebody put a picture up on Twitter about me scowling when they booked me for standing up for a woman in this racist juvenile court. Right. Yeah, he put me in jail for 5 days. He's a low-down SOB. He's always been a creep. He's never worked hard since he got out of law school. He's worked down there for that evil institution. And I did what I had to do. And he said, well, look, I said, there's a difference between manly anger at a wrong and somebody crying and losing it. No. That feminist idea of emotion. Harold Horn, by the way, is the creep. Anybody from Shelby County, he's a low-down creep, and anybody that continues to hire that evil incompetent who told me on the part of the tape that they erased and edited that he couldn't hear this woman's case because he had a golf tee-off or something like that he had to go to. So anyway, yeah, I was angry. That's a warrior's rage, you know?
I like
That's
that.
what we do. I'm not going, oh, boo-hoo. I'm going, you SOB, you low-down scumbag.
But Judge, a black man can't get angry like that. We can't have warrior rage. We're not.
Why not?
I mean, that's how they got us. They got us neutered almost. I mean, I'm just saying, like, it's like systemic neutering and emasculation.
From that. We need to get away from that. And one thing everybody forgets about the 60s is we adopted that attitude that some of us were going to play kamikaze.
Right.
And I can guarantee you that when that happens again, there's going to be a change. Have you seen this latest clip of this beating in Pasadena?
Oh, no, sir.
They said this black man had committed all these traffic violations. He wasn't driving when they found him, so it wasn't anything committed in their presence. So they try to drag him back to the car to sit him in the car so they can put him there. And he was 20 years old, so they wound up, the video shows they had him down. One guy's got a knee in his back and ramming his face into the sidewalk, and the other guy has got one of these nightsticks that they have outlawed, riot control batons, and he is deliberately beating this man on his backside until he purposely breaks the man's leg. So then they arrest him. They recommend that he get a high bond. They put a $50,000 bond on him. They made the bond for him, and the Los Angeles County DA's office declined to prosecute him, saying there's insufficient evidence to charge him with anything, and they're investigating these police. See, somebody is going to play kamikaze and say, oh, hell no, and somebody's actually going to get shot. Now, that happened, but you see, 1 or 2 times.
Right, last year. Last year.
But when it gets 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, somebody says, God damn, Bubba, I better stop that crap. They shot Earl's ass, and hell, you know, he got 3 children. Ain't nobody going to support now. We need to start treating them a little more, circumspectly. You know, they's dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's gone. I don't think it's gone. I had talked to this woman recently. She's a beautiful woman, former model. She's in her early 40s, and she said that she is not broken, but her market is broken. Like, she can't find a man that's compatible with her. I mean, she's beautiful. She get people to hit on her all the time, but the guys that in her age bracket, they can't step up to the plate. These are black men.
A very, very rich person who managed a section for CBS syndication that included me, Judy, Oprah, and Phil. Before he died, asked me to talk to his daughters to be candid. So I sat at the table with them. The oldest one was kind of plain, but she got married, and the youngest one was absolutely drop-dead movie star gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
She had her master's degree and was working on her PhD, and Daddy was a very, 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 etc. rich man.
Right.
So she says, Daddy said, I can be candid with you, Judge Brown. Don't get offended by what I say. I said, I won't. said, "Do you think I'm attractive?" I said, "Well, dear, you're drop dead gorgeous." She said, "Well, I'm smart. I'm working on my PhD and I'm in my early 20s. I said, "Yes, I know that. Your daddy's a smart man. You inherited it." "Well, I've got money. You know, I'm worth a couple of $100 million right now." She said, "Yes, I know that." She said, "Judge, why can't I find an eligible bachelor?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She says, "Every guy that takes me out is with like one of my girlfriends, but just with a dick." What happened to the men? I know there are men because my daddy's one, and he was one of the few straight, real guys in Hollywood.
Wow, that's a rarity, huh?
I mean, he was a big, muscular guy, and he drank whiskey, and he got up one time at this thing in Manhattan and said, "I like me some Judge Joe Brown." He said, "But I tell you what, I'd hate to have to square off with him because he would set my white ass in my place." He said, "But that Judy is a ugly woman." And they had to clean that up PR-wise. Took them a few weeks. He had Patti LaBelle up there, and they sang to me, what is it? "Scoochie, scoochie, yeah, yeah, yeah." You know. "Oh, hey, baby, I like that." You know. He said, "I like me some Judge Joe Brown." So anyway, I mean, I think it was Patti LaBelle. Yeah, that was it. It may have been something else down at one of these New Orleans Jazz Fest.
Oh, yeah.
I think Magic Johnson was sitting next to me. He got up and he walked behind the curtain, and it was a surprise. And you know, the Big Brother can sing.
Oh,
So
Magic Johnson can sing?
Yeah. Oh man, he can really get down. So
Wow.
Where's that coming from? He walked out, out front. But yeah. But see, even the rich white women, they're going off, "Why can't I find a guy that's not just a girl with a dick?"